Okay, today we're gonna tackle a big one. Oh, this here, I hope you can see it says Pinezza Pizza. This is gonna be a shameless plug for a sweet dear friend of mine down in Florida who owns the best pizzeria in Kissimmee, Florida, possibly all of Florida. He's from New York, so you know he knows how to make pizza. But if you're ever in Kissimmee, check him out. Pinezza Pizza, absolutely best pizza you'll ever have in Florida. Maybe even the best pizza you'll have in New York. That's saying a lot. But today, we are not going to discuss pizza. We're going to discuss that one thing that you pass by and you pick up at Costco every day that you go there. You may, well, not every day, but maybe you go there and you pick it up and you're like, oh, what am I going to do with that? I'm going to show you what to do with it. The dreaded wrapped boneless leg of lamb. I never see anybody comfortable with this. Meanwhile, it's probably the best piece of meat you're gonna get. Actually, the best lamb, in my opinion, comes from New Zealand. This is from Australia, which I would say is a close second. The problem with leg of lamb is that it smells gamey. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, it is a gamier meat. And number two, they wrap it in this thing here, and they don't do a proper job of preparing the lamb. So what you wind up doing is seasoning it with the rope all around it and wondering why it didn't taste good. First things first, we're gonna take this thing off. We're gonna use it again, so don't rip it off. Just take it off, and this could be kind of messy, so I recommend you do this in your sink. I use a separate cutting board when I'm dealing with raw meat. Here's the problem right here. This is the sinew, and for some godforsaken reason, they don't cut it out. And if you don't cut out the sinew, it smells. It's extremely gamey. You just take a knife to it and cut around it. It's a big hunk of nerve and fat. It ruins the lamb, especially this part right here. That has to all go. That's step one. The second thing they do is they leave a lot of this outside fat on. And that's not gonna add any flavor at all to your dish. Plus, it's hard, so you have to kind of get that off. And it's just a patience game. Use a very sharp knife. If you haven't watched my video on how to sharpen a knife, this would be a good time to start. And you know what? You're gonna lose a little bit of meat because you're not a professional butcher. I'm not a professional butcher, but it's okay, because you're not selling this for profit, and you're probably gonna lose maybe an ounce or two if you're careful. But this fat here has to go. We're just gonna, you just go under the skin, and you just cut up against the layer of fat, not towards the meat, towards the top. Because if you go down, there's a very good chance you're gonna wind up cutting more meat than you need to take off. This is probably intimidating for you if you've never done it before. But it's really not that bad. And it's okay if you leave a little on there. You just don't want to leave too much, because all that fat imparts a terrible scent to the food. The lamb itself has a good amount of fat marbling inside the meat. The outside fat doesn't need to be there. The second thing we're gonna do to make sure that this gaminess is gone is wipe this down with a little bit of vinegar. It really doesn't matter what vinegar you use, but I prefer a red wine vinegar. This is a sherry vinegar and it works fine. Just don't use a balsamic vinegar. You're just gonna put enough on there to cover it. Just a little splash, and massage it into the meat. And then guess what? All you're gonna do is rinse it off. That will kill the gaminess. Make sure that you get all of the vinegar off. So, what do you want to put inside of the lamb? Really, that's entirely up to you, but I'm going to show you what I use. I picked up a few of these ingredients from Costco, and I had to laugh, mostly at this one. Organic apples with the Mickey Mouse logo. As if organic wasn't expensive enough, why don't we just slap on some royalties for the mouse, whatever. And this is a little daunting. This is a container, 1.5 pound container of pine nuts. It's expensive. It holds up extremely well in the fridge. If you don't want to use this, you don't have to. You can use pecans, or you can use maybe even some slivered almonds, not that great, or walnuts. But what we're gonna stuff this lamb with today is apples, garlic, pine nuts, and rosemary. The first thing we need to do is we need to get these pine nuts in the oven to toast them a little bit. You can do it right on the stove top if you want. I just find it more consistent if you toast nuts in the oven. So you don't need much. I would say maybe 1/3 of a cup. So I set my oven at convection bake. It's not coming up to temp yet, it's only at 100 degrees. I'm gonna pop this in there and set the timer for 7 minutes. So while the pine nuts are toasting up, let's prepare this lamb. Very important tip. First thing that we're gonna do with this lamb is put lemon on it. Squeeze lemon on it. You don't need much for this leg. Depends on how much juice comes out of it. I thought we can get away with half a lemon, but it looks like we're gonna use a whole lemon. That you do not wipe off. Massage that lemon in there. That's a key ingredient. The second thing that you're gonna add to this lamb is a good quality white wine. This is from a dear friend of mine, Juan Sepulveda. He's the winemaker at Laurel Lake Vineyards. He makes the best Chardonnay on the North Fork, hands down. I call this a mini Rombauer. It's off the charts. And we're just gonna put some of that wine on there, however much you don't wanna drink. Probably about 1/2 cup. There's something unbelievably magical about the combination of lemon and wine together. The next step is we're gonna add some of our Celtic sea salt to that, if I can even say it today. Get both sides. With lamb, it's not a bad idea to go a little heavy with the salt. But again, it's up to you. And then we're gonna add some some dried organic rosemary. Not too much rosemary, because that does tend to dominate the dish. Oh, let's take a look at that beeping sound that you're hearing is our pine nuts. Let's go take a look at that first. And they need some more time. Now we're gonna add granulated garlic. Not too crazy, just coat it on the outside and on the inside. I would say a healthy dusting works really well with that. We're just gonna let this sit to the side for a minute because we're gonna stuff this with apples. If you don't have one of these apple cores and you cut up a lot of apples, let's say for apple pie or whatever, they work great. You just go over to the stem side and make sure you come out the bottom core. That's that. Super handy. Now, if you're ever making an apple pie or you're making a dish that requires a lot of apples and you're concerned about the apples turning color on you, these are gala apples, which we're gonna use here today. You could use any apple that you want. I like gala. It's like it's sweeter and it still holds up pretty well in the baking process. But if you're gonna do a lot of these, they're gonna turn brown on you. So you should have a bowl of water with a fresh lemon squeezed in it. And what that'll do is it'll keep the apple from turning brown. This is gonna happen really fast, so we don't need to worry about that. You just cube it up into small cubes. Typically, you would only need like 1 apple for this, and we still might only need 1 apple. I just saw that they were quite small. I figured let me cut up 2. Yep, I think we can get away with 1 apple. We certainly don't need 2. To these apples, we're gonna add a little bit of salt, not too much salt. A little bit of garlic, not too much garlic. A little bit of rosemary, not too much rosemary. And a splash of olive oil to this. Say about a tablespoon. All right, looks like our time is up here. Let's take a look at these things. Let's see that. Just, I would give them another minute or two. So the pine nuts needed a little bit more time, so I added another 2 minutes. Total time for the pine nuts is about 10 minutes. And this is exactly what you want your pine nuts to look like. They're brownish, the oils have been released, they're not overcooked. This just is added right here to the apples. Mix that all up with the apples. This is your stuffing for the lamb. All you do is add it right down the middle like this. This works much better if you have a second person to help you. And I may need that second person. You just roll up the lamb. That's why it's important to kind of do it also in a pan that has sides. It helps keep everything in place. When you wrap the lamb, inevitably one side will be fatter than the other side. You need to make a determination which is the narrower side. This side over here is narrowest to me. You take your little rubber sock that they give you with the lamb and you put it over one hand. Get your hand in there like a Madonna glove or something. Fashion, make a fashion statement. Wear that, okay. Get your fingers out like this. And I know this is probably at this point everyone's like, you know what, I'm not even gonna do this. It's easier with two people, but if you're by yourself, this is how you do it. You grab that narrow portion of the lamb, and don't worry about the stuffing if it falls out, it really doesn't matter. You palm it in your hand, and then you bring the stock over the lamb. Like that. Pull your hand out, and then just push the lamb into it. And the apples and the pine nuts that come out, it's okay. They're gonna brown nicely on the outside. This wasn't so horrible. Then we're gonna take our skillet that we roasted the pine nuts on, because that's going in the oven. And we put all those precious juices all around it, because we're gonna make a little bit of a gravy out of the juice that drips off of this lamb. This is gonna go in the oven at 375 convection roast. If you don't have convection roast, that's fine, 375 with a probe in the center. Now I like to cook my lamb a little on the rarer side. I will cook this to 130 degrees, which is not quite rare, it's medium rare, but that's where I like it. So in order to get it to 130 degrees, I'm gonna cook it to 125, and as it sits, it's gonna cook up to 130. Well, that came out extraordinary. I'm just gonna cover it, let it rest a little bit, slice it up. That's been sitting there for about 15 minutes. Set it aside here just for a second. I'm gonna bring this over to my stovetop and I'm gonna deglaze it. You want to try to break off all the little fragments that are stuck to the bottom of the pan with your wooden spoon. Okay, so that's at 350 right now, and I'm going to pour some wine into this. Oh, I wish you could smell that. It's fantastic. You want that wine to evaporate. You want no alcohol flavor whatsoever. So just let it do its thing. We're gonna just strain that into our little gravy boat. Carefully. And then just add a tiny little pat of butter to that. Stir it in. That's gonna be very silky when that butter melts. We're gonna cut off this elastic housing, stocking. This lamb is perfectly cooked. Cut it nice thin slices. Don't worry about it falling apart, that's normal, it's gonna happen. It took about an hour and a half to cook in the oven. You want it to cook slowly. It's moist, it's delicious. So I know that was a little daunting, dealing with the lamb, cleaning it up, putting it back in its elastic. So I would have to give it a 9 on the PETA scale, but it's not that terrifying. So pick up one of these and give it a try. Thank you for watching.